Do you know that feeling when you start investing all excited? Then you open the app after 1 month and think, wait, that's it? You expected a shift, a sense of progress, but the number barely moves and it creates this quiet frustration. You did the right thing, you sacrificed a little, you stayed consistent, and it still feels like you're going nowhere. You keep going, month 2, 3, 6, and it still looks too small for the effort. Then the dangerous thought shows up. I gave up so many things for this, for that. A year passes and you almost feel embarrassed to even mention it, because the result looks tiny compared to the sacrifice. And then the part that breaks most people hits. You look sideways. You see someone on TikTok saying they doubled their money in crypto, a coworker swearing day trading paid their month, a video promising shortcuts. Your brain runs a simple, brutal calculation. This isn't working. There's a specific number where that changes. And it's not what you think. Most people will tell you that you just need more discipline, more patience, a stronger long-term mindset to endure years of slow growth. They talk like you simply need to become a different person and the problem disappears. But that doesn't explain why so many smart people quit in the exact same way. Here's what they're missing. Your brain is terrible at measuring progress when growth is exponential. It looks at the early months, sees small, and assumes the future will be a straight line extension of the past. And there's a smaller milestone that flips everything, because it changes the ruler you use to decide whether this works. The number is the 843 rule. It sounds like an internet trick until you understand what it proves. It shows why the first stretch feels painfully slow and why later the timeline shrinks in a way your intuition can't predict. And that's exactly what separates, people who stay long enough for the curve to show up from people who quit too early. I study money psychology and financial behavior, why normal, smart people abandon good strategies at the worst moment. Subscribe and hit like if this helps, because today I'll show you the mental error that makes 90% quit early and how to neutralize it with one simple rule. By the end, you'll look at your progress in a completely different way. Before I explain why the 843 rule changes everything, I need to break a belief that feels obvious, but it's a trap. You expect effort and results to move together, like the gym. You put in work and you see progress month by month. But compound growth doesn't reward you that way at the beginning, and your brain hates that. That's the investor's invisible threshold. At a certain point, small results stops feeling like normal patience and starts feeling like emotional threat, like you're being fooled. Most people don't know this. Threshold exists so they react on impulse, switch strategies, chase shortcuts, stop contributing, right when the curve was about to change phases. Think of compound interest like pushing a heavy car on a flat road. At first you sweat, you strain, and it barely moves, which is infuriating because the effort is real and the progress is almost invisible. But there's a point where the car catches momentum, and then the same force suddenly goes further because now you have movement on your side. The 843 rule is where that momentum finally becomes visible to your perception. It's not that investing becomes magic overnight. It's that the curve lifts off the ground enough for your brain to notice it. And once it's visible, your brain stops punishing you with the feeling that you're doing this for nothing. Here's where it gets really interesting, because the magic happens in your brain. When you open the app and see tiny gains early on, your brain slips into survival mode. It doesn't think strategy, it thinks threat. What if I'm wasting time? What if I'm being fooled? What if I'm fall behind? And in survival mode, it triggers behaviors that look like reason, but are actually impulse wearing a suit. You start chasing novelty. Switching investments feels like the solution, because novelty creates a false sense of control. You start comparing yourself to fast win stories because your brain prefers narrative over statistics, and narratives always feel more real. You start overvaluing the short term. If it's not growing now, it's useless, because your brain projects the future as a straight line. And you start checking constantly as if looking more gives you more control, but it actually multiplies frustration and anxiety. It's like planning a vacation while your house is on fire. You try to think long term, but your emotions scream, fix it now. But when you cross the 843 rule, your brain finally has room to think differently. Instead of how do I survive boredom and frustration, you ask how do I grow and protect the process? You leave the mode of prove it works and enter the mode of build something that compounds. Then a subtle but powerful shift happens. You stop treating investing like entertainment. You stop needing emotion every month, and you start measuring success through consistency and systems. That's freeing because your brain stops demanding dopamine from your statement. Behavioral research, including well-known work tied to institutions like Princeton and foundational behavioral economics, shows that humans feel losses more intensely than equivalent gains. That connects directly to checking your app too often. You expose yourself to repeated micro losses and micro disappointments, which creates the feeling this isn't worth it. Once that feeling becomes a routine, your brain wants relief, even if the relief comes from a bad decision. There's also strong evidence in behavioral finance that the more frequently you observe volatility, the more likely you are to react emotionally and interrupt good long-term strategies. Not because you're weak, but because your brain evolved to respond to immediate danger, not 20-year charts. So it makes sense your brain tries to soothe itself, often using the worst possible shortcut. You might think the whole problem is simply lack of patience. And while patience matters, it's not what drives the pattern in real life. The secret is simpler and more encouraging. You don't need to be stronger than your brain. You need to stop feeding it ammo. Here's where the math gets exciting because it finally gives shape to what your brain can't feel. You'll see the problem was never that compound interest is weak, it's that you're judging it too early. Once you put real numbers on top, the feeling this isn't working starts falling apart. If you invest consistently, even without huge amounts, the beginning always feels ungrateful. Imagine someone in the US putting $500 a month into a broad index, like the S&P 500 through a 401k or Roth IRA long term. In the first months, what grows most is what you contributed, not what it earned, and that confuses your mind. Reaching the first visible milestone takes time because the chart starts crawling on the floor. If you look at month 3, month 6, month 12, you see a small increase and think, I'm sacrificing for this? It's not easy. Most people quit right here because they expect results to match effort immediately. But here's what will blow your mind. After the first stretch, the next stretch takes less time. That's what the 843 rule is trying to show you. The same distance and net worth starts getting covered faster, not because you became a genius, but because your accumulated money starts working harder than your new money. Think about it slowly. You did the same work. Contribute and don't mess with it. You didn't change your routine, you just kept breathing through the boredom of the early phase. But you saved time because you had a resource working for you, a bigger balance creating bigger growth. That's the mechanism showing up. The return stops being a little extra and becomes an engine. At first you push, later you steer because the weight you built starts pulling the curve upward. The 843 rule is like a progress bar that explains why the beginning feels so misleading. Now picture the progression in cycles, without fantasy about getting rich fast. Cycle 1 is the most annoying. You build the base, and the return feels small because it is small, and that's okay. Cycle 2 changes the feeling. The account starts responding, and the same jump happens in less time. Cycle 3 is when most people say, now I get it, because you see money doing more by itself. Once you reach a higher number, the next block arrives faster and the curve stops looking like a straight line. The first milestone feels impossible, but the next ones get easier because you're no longer at zero. Now the demystification, because I don't want this to sound like a secret club. This isn't exclusive access. It's not an influencer trick. It's not the perfect investment only a few people know. It's basic math on your side, and the only difference is scale. $500 a month becomes a different universe over time. That's why comparing your month 6 to someone else's year 8 is a ridiculous trap. You're comparing a rocket on the launch pad to a rocket already past the atmosphere, then calling yours slow. What decides the game isn't brilliance, it's surviving the stretch where progress isn't emotionally satisfying yet. Here's what most people miss when they talk about compound interest. It's not about how much you earned, it's about who you become while you wait. When you cross the 843 rule, you didn't just gain a bigger number in your account, you gained a new identity. You become the kind of person who doesn't need weekly excitement to stay on plan. You rewired your brain in a very specific way. You trained boredom tolerance, delay tolerance, the ability to sit with nothing is happening without panicking, touching, or chasing shortcuts. That's not just an investing skill, it's a life skill, because almost everything worth having requires that muscle. And here's a detail nobody says out loud. The 843 rule changes your relationship with time. Before you live on short time, I need results soon. Next month has to look better. After you start living on long time, where consistency beats impulse and your plan is stronger than your mood. Before this shift, your financial life becomes a mess of micro decisions and micro reactions. You wake up thinking, should I switch funds? Should I buy this stock? Should I sell before it gets worse? Am I missing an opportunity? Each question sounds smart, but in practice, it's anxiety trying to feel in control. You get trapped in a checking loop that steals your peace. A down day feels like a judgment on you. A bad week becomes, I'm not built for this. A flat month turns into this is pointless. Then you start making decisions to reduce feelings, not to build wealth. The 843 rule cuts that knot because it changes what slow means in your head. You stop reading the early phase as proof of failure and start reading it as a normal part of the process, like warming up before the real work. That lowers panic. And when panic drops, you can do what almost nobody can do: stay. And when you learn to stay, you gain a kind of freedom that's invisible but changes your posture. You realize you don't need to beat the market every week. You need to beat your own brain during the phase when it wants to quit. You replace monthly results with yearly systems, and that's where the game flips. That's where micro becomes macro for real. Before you sweat small things, daily prices, influencer takes, breaking news, the coworker who made money in crypto. After you focus on big decisions, raising your contribution rate, lowering costs, avoiding fees, keeping allocation simple, protecting the plan. You start thinking like a builder, not a hunter. You understand the most important early return is learning not to interrupt your own process. That also changes how you use information. You stop consuming content to find the secret and start using it to reinforce the basics. Now, here's a transformation people in the US feel in real life: work and career. Before you have margin, you accept almost anything because you're always one surprise away from chaos. You tolerate a bad boss, extra hours, frozen pay, because anxiety keeps saying, don't risk it. You're trapped, and people can feel it even if nobody says it. Your energy carries urgency. You need the next paycheck to breathe, the bonus to relax. Nothing can go wrong. And when you need, you negotiate badly. You don't have walking away power. You can't say no calmly, can't switch companies when you should, can't ask for a raise with confidence. You stay smaller than you could be, not because of talent, but because you lack financial and emotional margin. When the 843 rule truly clicks, your foundation changes. You build margin through automatic contributions, consistency, and less emotional self-sabotage. Margin becomes power because it gives you the option to walk away, even if you never use it. Then the cascade effect shows up, and it's almost scary how real it is. You sleep better because you stop punishing yourself for not moving fast enough. You speak differently because you trust the process, and trust changes posture. Often you don't even need to use the power in a dramatic way. Just having an emergency buffer and a plan that moves without constant tinkering makes you less reactive. People notice because you're no longer desperate to prove something. Now, the fatal mistake that knocks people out right when it starts working. This is where most people mess up. They see progress and think, now I can accelerate by chasing adrenaline. They confuse investing with entertainment and start trading for emotion, not building for the long run. They fall back into the same addiction that pulled them off track early: the need for fast rewards. One lucky win becomes, I'm a genius. One loss becomes shame, and the brain loop returns instantly. Don't do this, because it breaks the foundation of your future: time, repetition, and predictability. Another common sabotage is using early progress as permission to loosen up. Now it's moving. I can pause for a few months. Now I can pull some out. Now I deserve to spend more because I'm investing. Without noticing, you go back to measuring success by feelings instead of consistency. The opportunities that appear when you don't quit feel unfair in the best way. Before, a surprise expense is a disaster: flat tire, medical copay, home repair, and you panic because anything turns into debt. After years of margin, those same events become inconveniences, not emergencies. And when the unexpected becomes an inconvenience, space opens for big moves. You can invest in a certification, switch jobs, negotiate harder, start a side project, make decisions that increase income. You stop being hostage to right now and become owner of 5 years from now because you don't shut off the engine mid-launch. This will make you laugh or cry. Because the hidden villain behind 90% quitting too early isn't lack of intelligence. It's a trio that looks harmless when you're tired: comparison, checking, and emotional urgency. It's like your brain charges you a daily fee to stay on the plan. And if you don't pay that fee in dopamine, it tries to pull you out of the game. Watch how it happens in real life. No drama required. You invest consistently, but you open the app constantly and see not much. Then you scroll TikTok and watch someone claim they made 500% in crypto. Your brain stitches those two images together and concludes, I'm wasting time, as if everyone is moving forward and you're the only one standing still. Now do a calculation that stings but wakes you up. If you invest $500 a month and quit at month 18 because this isn't worth it, you don't just lose contributions. You lose time working in your favor. And time is the one ingredient you can't buy back. Not with a higher salary, not with luck, not with shortcuts. Here's an absurd analogy. It's like planting a tree, watering it for a year and a half, then ripping it out because it hasn't made shade yet. Shade was the entire point, but you judged too early during the root building phase. And in investing, the roots are the exact phase where your brain wants to quit, because progress isn't emotionally rewarding yet. Even more ridiculous, this villain actively destroys value. It doesn't just make you exit early, it pushes you into expensive decisions. Selling on dips, buying at peaks, switching constantly, paying fees, chasing hype. It's like swapping a construction plan for a pile of small bets that feel like action, but are really just anxiety moving around. And here's what people don't like admitting. Constant checking becomes a mild addiction. Not an addiction to pleasure, an addiction to relief. You open the app to feel in control, then you feel in. Close it more anxious because you saw tiny gains or a red day. So you open it again like more information will cure the feeling. And that loop eats your conviction. But I get it. You want to feel like you're doing the right thing and that it's paying off, and the early silence feels like punishment. You want safety, progress, proof that it's working, but the first part of the curve doesn't deliver that in the way your brain demands. That's why the 8-4-3 rule is a lens shift, not a cute math trick. When you understand 8-4-3, you stop demanding that the first phase behave like the third phase. You stop measuring the process with the wrong ruler and start protecting your investment from your own moods. Now, opportunity cost in the most real way possible. Instead of, can I afford this? The question becomes, what does this cost in future years? Because every time you stop contributing for 6 months, you're not just saving money, you're buying a delay that can cost you years of compounding later. Imagine you invest $500 a month and out of anxiety, you pause for 12 months until the market feels safer. It feels prudent, but what you're really trading is consistency for a temporary sense of safety. And that 1 year isn't just 12 missed deposits. It's a full year where the engine didn't get fuel in time to accelerate. Here's the posture shift. Once you see that, fast money loses its charm. That video promising easy returns suddenly looks like what it is, an expensive distraction. And the urge to tinker just to feel control starts looking dangerous, like driving while staring at the horn. The beautiful irony is this. Person A looks bold. They switch strategies constantly, chase hype, collect stories of wins and losses, and feel in the game. But they live tired, always restarting, always needing the next move to fix the last one. They have motion without direction, and it turns into emotional financial chaos. Person B looks boring. They automate, they stop checking daily, they ignore competition, they repeat the basics, and they measure success by consecutive months, not exciting days. And over time, they become the person with options, a buffer, margin, the power to say no, and freedom to choose. Here's what will surprise you. You don't actually want half the things that tempt you to quit. You don't want the adrenaline of a lucky bet. You want the peace of knowing your future is being handled. This isn't about being miserable or never looking. It's about being intentional with what you feed your mind. The 8-4-3 rule won't make you rich overnight, but it changes how you interpret the beginning, and that changes whether you ever reach the part where the curve becomes obvious. That's the difference between surviving boredom and thriving through consistency. Start building today in the simplest way possible, because simplicity beats anxiety. Automate your contributions right after payday, choose one fixed day to review your investments, and treat consistency as the main goal, not the month's outcome. Trust me, your future self won't thank you for feeling in control. They'll thank you for staying when your brain wanted to run.